Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Friday night study. Tonight we have a new speaker, so new to us. He's spoken to other groups and participates in a variety of different Zoom rooms. I'm going to ask Everett to talk about himself a little bit, introduce himself, because many of us don't know him, except the occasional giver of wisdom here and there during the discussions. So take it away, Everett. You can introduce yourself and your topic.
Yeah, my family started attending the Worldwide Church of God when I was 12. That was, 10 or 15 years ago, a little bit more than that in 1962. I went to Ambassador College, graduated in 71, and worked for Worldwide Church of God in their computer department for the next almost 35 years. When at one point in time, they had somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 employees there in Pasadena. And when I finally got laid off, I think there were 30 that were left. So it was quite a wild ride there. And at that particular point in time, or when the doctrines of the church started changing, I said, well, I can't say this is all junk unless I've read it all. So I set out to try to verify the new stuff that was coming out. And I found it to be 99% junk. My brother, who was a little older than I am, saw it a different way, and consequently, we had some heated discussions. But I am grateful to him because I couldn't just prove it to myself. I had to prove it to him as well, and it took my studies to a little bit of a different level. And I think I've found some things that the Church of God has missed over the years. Anyway, I still live in the Pasadena area, and semi-retired, I guess, right now. And as Don mentioned, spending a lot of time on Zoom meetings. So anyhow, the subject today I wanted to talk about was especially the seventh day of unleavened bread. But we'll kind of touch on the thinking or the meaning, the meaning behind the entire festival as well. Specifically, the seventh day, according to Jewish tradition, is the day that Israel passed through the Red Sea. In the Chabad website, it says the seventh day of Pesach is a Yom Tov, or it's a good day, on which we celebrate the miracle of the splitting of the sea. It is called Shvili Shel Pesach, for what that's worth. Also, the book of Jubilees talks about the celebrating the feast in haste when you went forth from Egypt till you entered into the wilderness of Shur, for on the shore of the sea you completed it. So they don't specifically say that the seventh day is when they arrived on the other side, but it reinforced what Chabad had to say about that. But there's no real scriptural positive proof or statement that it was the seventh day. But certainly we expect important events, or we're not surprised when important events occur on holy days, annual holy days. And certainly the rescue through the sea was an important event. When they got to the other side and Pharaoh's armies were destroyed, there was no real need to rush anymore. So things that was definitely a turning point. Definitely a turning point. So I'd like to share my screen here and we'll get started looking at what the scriptures have to say about this particular day. Okay. Well, I think this will do me anyway. So I wanted to start with the account of Israel going through the sea. And that's in 1 Corinthians, well, the New Testament account, Paul's account. 1 Corinthians 10. Whoops. Okay, there we go. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 1. Moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea. All were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And they all ate the same spiritual food. And they drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them. That rock was Christ. But with most of them, God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. It seems to me that when it's talking about they drank the same spiritual drink, and they drank of that rock that was Christ, what they did is they saw the awesome works that he had done for them. Everything from the 10 plagues that had come upon Egypt, the killing of the firstborn, being released, forced out into the wilderness, the cloud that was over them, and then the fire at night. And they saw all of this stuff. It must have been an incredible experience, but somehow it just didn't register. In the context of this actually starts before the actual account. As you all know, that there aren't any chapter breaks really in the original text. And I want to start reading a few verses before, verse 24. Do you not know that those who run a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should be disqualified. And then he goes right into the account. He doesn't want us to be unaware that it didn't work that way with the children of Israel. They had other problems, other issues, that they didn't discipline that body and bring it into subjection. Continuing on where we left off, but down in chapter 10, with most of them, God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now, these things became our examples. This is why Paul is talking about this, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they lusted. Do not become idolaters, as some of them were, as written. The people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Nor let us commit sexual immorality, as some of them did. And in one day, 23,000 fell. Nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed by the serpents. Nor complain, as some of them also complained and were destroyed by the destroyer. All these things happened to them as examples, and they're written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the earth have come. Therefore, let him who thinks he stand take heed lest he fall. Israel had an awesome experience in the 7 days of unleavened bread until they crossed the sea. And yet it didn't register, didn't seem to sink in that their creator knew what they needed before they knew what they needed. And he was going to take care of them. They didn't have to work any angles. All they had to do was keep walking in the desert. But it just didn't sink in. Now, during that time, they were unleavened, figuratively, without sin, not reality. I remember being taught that unleavened bread pictured coming out of sin or putting out sin. But in fact, no leaven is allowed. Wouldn't that indicate rather no sin, a time of sinlessness? Leaven can sneak up on us. And I'm sure you're all familiar with 1 Corinthians 5:6. We'll go there. You'll probably be reading this a lot. Therefore, verse 7, purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, since you're truly unleavened. For indeed, Christ our Passover was sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast, not with old leaven or with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. We're supposed to be a people that you are what you see. What you see is what you get. There's no malice, no wickedness, no deceit at all in how we conduct our lives, how we conduct ourselves. Leaven, even a little bit, once it's in the lump, just keeps growing and growing and growing. Matthew 13. Verse 33. We read this a few weeks ago, another parable he spoke to them. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till it was all leavened. If nothing else, this shows the insidious nature of leaven. It just doesn't quit. It's not gonna give in. Just a little bit is all you need, and a little bit of time, and it pretty much takes over. Unstoppable. And it comes in all kinds of different forms. Luke 12:1 talks about the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy, which may not be an overt sin, against some particular person, and then again it might. But it's just a blight. It's valuing yourself above somebody else, that you get to get away with something that you wouldn't allow anybody else to get away with. Of course, the Laodicean sin was that of self-sufficiency. Their self-sufficiency. They're rich and increased with goods, in need of nothing. Thank you very much. But that's not supposed to be the way we conduct ourselves. Romans 6, verse 16. Do you not know that to whom you present yourself slaves to obey, you are that one slaves whom you obey, whether of sin leading to death or of obedience leading to righteousness? A little bit over a period of time is going to send you in the wrong direction. The leaven of malice will grow. The righteousness is not really related to something that automatically grows without effort. It takes effort to understand what righteous is, and examining the lives of our Savior and the instruction of our Creator. Baptism is supposed to engender a different approach to life. Verse 3 of Romans 6. Or do you not know that as many of us were baptized unto Christ Jesus, were baptized into his death? Therefore, we were buried with him through baptism unto death. That is, the person that we were, our approach, our mentality, was supposed to die in that particular event. That just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we should walk in newness of life. It's a different approach, a different way. Let's see. For if we've been united together in the likeness of his death, verse 5, certainly we shall also be in the likeness of his resurrection. He gave up the human existence and took on a spiritual existence, not focused on the flesh, but focused on the will of his Father as well. And we should be conducting ourselves, if he's going to be living in us, we ought to reflect that. Verse 6, knowing this, that our old man was crucified with him, that the body of sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves of sin. That's not what is supposed to happen in the new life. No longer slaves to sin, no longer has control over us. The flesh doesn't control anymore, which is reflected in Galatians 5 and verse 24. Those who are Christ's have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Obviously, ancient Israel didn't get it. And their example is for us that, we can have that same problem. if we're not careful. I was told that I needed to build godly character. Herbert Armstrong wrote in Incredible Human Potential, such perfect spiritual and holy character cannot be created by fiat. It must be developed, and that requires time and experience. Well, if when we're coming up from baptism, we walk in newness of life, how much time and experience is that supposed to take? If we're supposed to put on the new man, how long does that take? It sounds like change of clothes is what it's trying to like itself to. Ephesians 4 talks about that. Verse 22, and that you put off concerning your former conduct, the old man, chuck him, which grows corrupt according to deceitful lust. They're again like leaven. The deceitful lust kind of grow just naturally, that they expand. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind, that you put on the new man, which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. It seems to me changing our character does require time and experience if we do it ourselves. But I think what we can do is we can change our values. We can change our values instantly. And when we value our Creator and our Savior more than we value anything else, the old man will have been squashed. We sin when we value something more than we value our relationship with our Creator. Galatians 3:27. For as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. That he should be the controlling factor in how we conduct our lives. No room for negotiation, if you will. We do what is pleasing in his sight. Not in our own sight. With us, self-preservation is usually pretty high on the list. And that's what ancient Israel did, basically, is when they got into a little bit of a bind, they grumbled, complained. Moses felt at times that they were about to stone him. They didn't trust their Creator to know what they needed and to provide it for them. And we obviously have to work for ourselves. He expects us to, do what we can. There's an old saying, God helps those that help themselves. Well, there's another saying that probably ought to be said at the same time. God helps those that can't help themselves. When we've done everything we can, he will take up the the slack. And we need to trust him to do that. And when we put on Christ, that's what he expects us, that we wrap ourselves in him and trust that he is going to fill the voids that we can't. Luke 9. "23, and he said to them all, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will save it." Tagore mentioned last time around that the standard was higher than we had probably realized. And I think he's absolutely right, that he expects us to not be concerned about taking care of our physical flesh, physical bodies, comforts, and protecting our backside. He expects us to do what is right and just and good, and leave him to fill in the voids that come about as a result of that. Colossians 3. But now, verse 8, you yourselves are to put off all of these: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you put off the old man with his deeds, and have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him who created him. That's the example that we should be looking to, is the image of our Savior that created us. Paul doesn't seem to be saying here that you should be working towards this. He seems to be saying that it's already done. You've put off the old man, and you've taken on Christ, Messiah. It's not really a process as it's described in this particular case. The old man is a problem. James 1. And verse 14. But each one is tempted when he's drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then, when desire has conceived, gives birth to sin. Sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. It can start out just a little itty bitty thing, little temptation that you allow yourself to entertain. And it gets bigger and bigger and entices us to do things that we really know we shouldn't be doing. Well, if we get what ancient Israel did not, what will that do for us? Let's look at what it would have done for ancient Israel. Before we go there, let me remind us of the problems. If we don't clean out the leavening, if we don't get this taken care of. Exodus 12, verse 18. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. For 7 days, no leaven shall be found in your homes, since whoever eats what is leavened, that same person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is a stranger or a native in the land. Being cut off was basically a death sentence. They would not survive just by cheating on their diet. It's pretty severe penalty. Okay, so what do we have to look forward to? Exodus 15 describes the joy they felt when they got to the other side. And I think it has some special meaning for us. They broke out in song. And start in verse 2 here. The Lord is my strength, my song. He has become my salvation. He is my God. I will praise him, my Father, and I will exalt him. That he saved them from the Egyptians, brought them to the other side over a great divide that they couldn't imagine how they could have ever done that, but they did by his strength and his mighty hand. Verse 8, and with the blast of your nostrils, the waters were gathered together. The floods stood upright like a heap. The depths congealed in the heart of the sea. And verse 10, you blew with your wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Verse 13, you in your mercy have led forth the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them in your strength to your holy habitation. The people will hear and be afraid. Sorrow will take hold of the inhabitants of Philistia. And down in verse 16, fear and dread will fall on them. By the greatness of your arm, they will be as still as stone, till your people pass over, O Lord, till the people pass over whom you have purchased. You will bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which you have made for your own dwelling, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. So they were thinking that they were going to be moving into God's house. This phrase, the Lord shall reign forever and ever, in the New King James anyway, appears 6 times. The other 5 are all talking about things that are happening during the millennium, not 3,500 years ago when Israel crossed the Red Sea. So it seems to me that this is a prophecy, among other things, that they were going to Sinai. They expected to find Yah at Sinai, But they were rejoicing because they had arrived, on the other side of this great divide. And it was like being in Yah's house. But it didn't really work out that way for them. Hebrews 3 and verse 10. Well, let's go with 8. Do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion, in the day of trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tested me, tried me, saw my works 40 years. Therefore, I was angry with that generation and said, they always go astray in their heart. And they have not known my ways. So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. That was what the deceitfulness of sin did for them. The lack of trust did for them. That they grumbled and complained continually. Yes, I wanted to read verse 13 as well. But exhort one another daily while it's called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Reminder again, it's telling us multiple times here. Remember, take heed, you who think you stand, lest you fall. These are our examples that are set for us today. Well, as it turns out, there's a summary of what happened to ancient Israel in Isaiah chapter 51 and verse 10. It talks about this same event. Are you not the one who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, that made the depths of the sea a road for the redeemed to cross over? Isn't that what ancient Israel was singing about? That he took care of them and brought them, crossed them over the sea. So the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with singing, with everlasting joy on their heads. That's Zion, the house, the dwelling place of God. Everlasting joy on their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness. Sorrow and sighing shall flee away. The redeemed shall cross over. The ransomed of the Lord shall return. Well, as it turns out, in Revelation 14, I have a group that seems to fit this description much better than ancient Israel did. Then I looked, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion, with him 144,000, having his father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters, like the voice of loud thunder. I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. And they sang, as it were, a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures, the elders. No one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. These are the ones who are not defiled with women. They're virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God. Seems like these folks got it. They're without fault before God. They're in Zion, they're singing, and they're redeemed, which is exactly what was, ancient Israel tried to picture when they crossed over the Great Divide. So it seems to me these folks fit that description and that song that Israel sang more than Israel did. The eternal reigns forever. And I think these folks are going to be with the eternal forever. Ancient Israel was a type of those sincere believers, but they didn't get it. They went down, but they didn't experience the newness of life. So, what occasion was this when these folks were standing on Mount Zion, singing, redeemed? Well, what occasion was it for ancient Israel when they crossed the divide, redeemed, singing? And was this before the tribulation or after the tribulation? Doesn't mention anything about the tribulation right here. Well, we'll look at that in a little while. But the ancient Israel didn't incorporate Moses, let alone Yeshua. 2 Peter 1, verse 4. I think we can say, by which we have been given to us exceeding great and precious promises, that through these you may be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. That was Peter's expectation, anyway. But that was the here and now for those believers. 1 John 3 and verse 2. Beloved, now we are the children of God, and it's not yet been revealed what we shall be. But we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And everyone who has this hope in him purifies himself, just as he is pure. It takes more than just being able to read this to actually accomplish it. We need to trust him to do everything we can legally, responsibly, in righteousness, to provide for ourselves and trust him to fill up whatever we lack. Let's consider another scripture that I skipped over the first time we read Exodus 15. It's verse 12. You stretched out your right hand. The earth swallowed them. Well, as it turns out, in Revelation, there's also a talk about earth swallowing. In Revelation 12, verse 14, but the woman who I take as the faithful throughout time, A woman was given two wings. Now, wait a minute. I want to go back before that. Oh, yeah. Now, when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given two wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she's nourished for a time, times, and half a time from the presence of the serpent. So there are those who will be protected from the tribulation, the attack of Satan. Verse 15, so the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might be that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. But the earth helped the woman. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon spewed out of his mouth. So not only do we have a connection between ancient Israel crossing the Red Sea and those 144,000 in Zion redeemed, we've got a connection here between the woman, like I said, what I consider the faithful, the truly faithful of all time, that are protected from the presence of the serpent. He sends out his flood, whatever that happens to be, not dissimilar to what happened to ancient Israel when the armies came after them. And the earth swallows it up, takes care of it. There again, the Creator is busy on the job. Earth helped the woman. Earth opened his mouth, swallowed up the flood, which the dragon had spewed out. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. The faithful have offspring. Are there different groups, different perspectives that can't seem to get along? And her offspring then go and are persecuted by Satan. He turns his attention to them. Who would that be? Revelation 7. We have a couple of groups. It talks about the 144,000 earlier in the chapter. And after these things, verse 9, I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, tongues, standing before the throne, before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands. In verse 13, one of the elders answered, saying to me, who are these arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from? And I said to him, sir, you know. So he said to me, these are the ones who come out of the great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. So the process of tribulation evidently allowed these folks to clean themselves up. They finally got whatever message that they were lacking before. So if these are the ones who go through the great tribulation, doesn't it stand to reason that the 144,000 that are spoken of earlier do not go through that tribulation. We didn't read anything about a relationship between the beast, the false prophet, and the 144,000 in Revelation 14. So if the great multitude, if the unique thing about them is they do go through the tribulation, then this group is not part of that. Now, verse 3, it talks about sealing some servants. Do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God and their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. Now, as it turns out, the way this is written, 144,000 who were sealed. Scripture for all, which this might work, it might not. Hang on. Okay. Scripture for all, I assume you can see that.
We have looks like a piece of material. It's a bluish green. It has nothing on it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not what I wanted to do.
Your Bible is under it though. Like it popped up over your Bible.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's yeah, that's not what I wanted to do.
Now it's gone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as it turns out, where it says we're sealed, that is in the present or a past participle. It is an action past. It's easy to read that as if that they were sealed as a result of verse 3. But it's actually stating an action that happened that is already done as of verse 3. And the scripture for all, which I tried to bring up but can't with this particular version of Zoom anymore for some reason, translates that as ones having been sealed. In other words, there are a bunch that need to be sealed because there are a bunch of problems coming on the earth. But the ones that were sealed don't need to be sealed. They're taken care of. And we are told, among other places, in Revelation 3, that at least some of those in the churches of God, because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world, to test those who dwell on the earth. But there will be some who are already sealed, who are already protected. And those are not the ones that the four winds and the four angels are being held back to protect. They're already taken care of. Um, so we have ancient Israel. We went through the sea, arrived on the other side, and had experiences that mirror the woman in Revelation 12, the 144,000 in Revelation 14, and there's another group that is going to have to go through that trial, that tribulation. They're not going to be able to cross over that great divide, but they are going to be able to understand, where they lacked, wash their garments, and ultimately be a part of the kingdom that Yeshua is going to bring to this earth. Now, in Leviticus 23, and verse 15, it talks about Pentecost. You shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Verse 17, you shall bring from your dwellings 2 wave loaves, 2/10 of an ephah. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baked with leaven. They are first fruits to the Lord. Well, Revelation 14 was called first fruits as well. But they're baked with leaven. The ancient Israel was unleavened. In Exodus 34, and verse 22, you shall observe the Feast of Weeks of the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the Feast of Ingathering at the year's end. Ancient Israel was redeemed in the barley harvest, brought out of Egypt in the barley harvest. If the 144,000 reflect that, they're the first fruits of the barley harvest. Isn't that the way the pattern would usually work? Ancient Israel crossed the great divide on the 7th day of unleavened bread. It makes them part of the barley harvest. Whereas the first fruits that Pentecost is talking about is the wheat harvest, which would follow the barley harvest. Well, as it turns out, there's another harvest in Revelation 14. I looked, and behold, a white cloud. This, of course, is after verses 1 through 5. This is in verse 14 of verse 14 and chapter 14. A white cloud, and on the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, with his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. Now, since this individual is described like the Son of Man, there seems to be a connection there to Yeshua, Christ. And certainly verse 17 starts talking about another harvest. And that harvest gets tossed into the winepress of the wrath of God. So we assume that this first harvest, reaped by one like the Son of Man, didn't go into that winepress. But immediately after that description, we're seeing something like a sea of glass mingled with fire, and those who have the victory over the beast, over his image, and over his mark, over the number of his name, standing on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. They sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, "Great and marvelous are your works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of the saints." Well, how would they overcome the beast? Actually, in Revelation 13, I think it's around verse 7. This is talking about the beast. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. So how is it that those in Revelation 15 overcame him? Well, it seems to me the only way to do that is if they didn't cave in and they paid with their lives. They would have been out of his control at that point in time. So they could be considered the wheat harvest. They're baked with sin. They evidently had something that they needed to overcome. Revelation 7 mentioned that they washed their robes white in the blood of the Lamb. They had something to overcome, and they did it. Although it must have been a traumatic and painful experience. So it seems to me that Yah is holding out to us the opportunity to take that example that Israel set. You can learn by bad examples as much as good examples, and trust our Creator that He knows what's best. We don't have to work the angles. We don't have to play games to get what we want. That there's an expression, it's easier to get forgiveness than permission. We want permission. We don't want what He doesn't want us to have. And we ought to be content to wait until He provides it. We can learn from their example, and we can walk in a different way, not protecting ourselves, not allowing a little sin to grow, but trusting Him, walking in His way, following His example, and doing what is pleasing in His sight. We sin when we value something more than we value our relationship with our Creator. And that relationship is what is going to take us to the next level. Wrap ourselves in Yeshua and serve Him and not ourselves. So with that, I'm open for questions, comments, observations, whatever.
Crystal's iPad.
In the chat, somebody had said, "What's this teaching about?" And so my takeaway was it's about behavior, old man behavior, living without faith in sin, versus new man behavior, walking in the mind of Christ. Is that correct?
Probably a good summary, yeah. What is really important to get out of it is that they messed up, and we're told many times to, take heed, pay attention, and we need to always be diligent in that. Yeah.
Igor?
Yeah, I have a question, Everett. You mentioned, I remember you mentioned harvest, one at wave sheaf offering, that's probably barley, and Pentecost is wheat. Do you see two or one more harvest at Feast of Tabernacles?
There is, well, we've always looked at tabernacles as the great harvest. And yeah, I see it as a harvest. I don't know off the top of my head that Revelation talks about it in that way, but the dead, small and great, and stand before the Creator, the Savior, and are judged, and we presume some are deemed qualified and some are not. So there's a another great multitude to look forward to.
So total, how many harvests do you think, do you see in scriptures? Just two or three? Because traditionally we were taught there are just two. That's why I'm curious, what's your insight into that subject?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The term first resurrection is not used outside of Revelation. It's called the resurrection of the just in the Gospels. Whether you want to, and it's how you consider a harvest. I think the way the holy days lay it out, there would be three. There are three great festivals, and the barley is the first fruits, and wheat is then harvested a little bit later. And then in the fall, there's a great harvest of all kinds of different fruits and vegetables, and fruits and nuts. So yeah, that's how I would see it. Now, exactly how that plays out, I wouldn't want to go into detail on especially that third harvest. I feel a little more comfortable with the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, that exactly how that third harvest is going to play out, I'm not sure.
Sure, thank you. You're anyway stretching our minds to think beyond what we were told. Thank you.
Dan?
Okay, I hit some wrong keys there, but thanks for acknowledging me, Don. Yes, Everett, I do have a question. About a half an hour ago, I think you made this statement. I can't remember if you said it seems or it seems to me. I can't remember. But you made the statement, it seems that the 144,000 will be with the eternal forever. Is that meant to imply anything about those who are not among the 144,000? I'll sit back and listen.
No, I don't think so. It seems to me that they, if I remember correctly, they serve in the temple. Now, of course, in the New Jerusalem, Yah and Yeshua are the temple. So, I don't know exactly how that works. But no, it's not meant to say anything about anybody else, but those that were described there as follow the Lamb wherever he goes.
Okay. All right. So is the implication that they may have well, we'll all have a relationship with the eternal, but is that meant to imply they will have a special type? Because they do seem to be singled out as, they do seem to be differentiated as a group.
Yeah, and there is differentiation, exactly what it means. I wouldn't want to be very dogmatic about it, but in Revelation 14, it talks about the 144,000 following the Lamb wherever he goes. In Revelation, I think it's 7, it talks about the great multitude that serves in his temple. So there's a distinction. Of course, if you could even go to Ezekiel 40, the temple there, the sons of Zadok serve the prince, whereas the other Levites, not so faithful Levites, are going to wait on the people. So there's, a distinction there as well that may be similar. So we have a little bit of a glimpse, but exactly how it's going to play out is we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, that the analogy with Zadok was very helpful. Thank you.
Don Roth?
I was kind of questioning the barley harvest, because in the barley harvest, the high priest raises just a handful of pure grain, and that is the wave sheaf offering, which is represented by Christ. And you see that in John 20. So as a general harvest, I don't understand, unless you're just referring to Christ, but the harvest of human beings is the Pentecost harvest, which is the 2 loaves baked with leaven being sin, and the fact that when you take the loaves that are baked with sin, leaven, what happens, of course, in the process of baking those loaves, the leaven is killed. The sin is, in effect, destroyed. And so that is representative of the first harvest. Now, unless you're looking at Christ as being a harvest, I guess you could look at it, but it's not a general harvest.
Well, of course, yeah, the wave sheaf is obviously Yeshua, but that was done at the beginning of unleavened bread, generally speaking, earlier in unleavened bread. That allowed the rest of Israel to begin the harvest. And so they could harvest from the time of that cutting of an offering of the wave sheaf. If you look at the wave sheaf offering, there was a memorial portion, I think that's what it's called, that was actually burned on the altar and ascended up to the Father, or Yah. But the rest of it was given to the priests. Well, if you look at that, who are our priests? Well, Yeshua is our priest as well. So he's kind of doing double duty in that particular case. But yeah, he was the first of the first fruits. But that did not preclude a continual harvest throughout the days of unleavened bread. And even that initial portion sort of indicates, or it can picture the rest of the faithful, the unleavened, being under the control of Yeshua and under the direction of Yeshua. Now, we've never looked at least from my experience with the Church of God, never looked at ancient Israel as being part of that unleavened bread harvest. But they were redeemed. They went over the Red Sea and they arrived on the other side. And because we have never looked at it that way, doesn't preclude us from entertaining that perspective.
I think it's kind of important if we understand the truth, or really the what takes place with the barley harvest. You see, what it says in Leviticus that when you come into the land, so basically we're looking at when he comes into the land. When did they come into the land? That will be my first question to you. When did they come into the land?
Well, initially it was on the 10th day of the first month.
Well, I don't think so. I think they came into the land on the year before. That would be on the east side of the Jordan. You look at the prophecies that Abraham receives, he is told that the land that he's going to be given is on both sides of the Jordan. And so you would have to understand that if Moses goes up into a mountain and looks north, south, east, and west, and he's on the east side of the Jordan, he is standing in the promised land, right?
I suppose you could look at it that way. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you mean? I mean, either he was or he wasn't.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay.
Right. He was. And so now it becomes interesting to understand about when do you plant the barley and the wheat? When is it planted? What time of the year?
I'm not. I've not thought about that.
Okay, I'll explain it to you. It's planted in the fall.
Okay.
You see, this is why when Joshua crossed and they are going to have the Passover and the first days of unleavened bread, and they're going to make a wave sheaf offering. They had a wave sheaf offering to make because they had a product, or they had the barley that the Israelites actually raised. Now, they raised it on the east side of the Jordan. Now, we get the impression that they were not farmers at all. They were just cattle people. Well, it just so happens you have to understand something about how this works. And I have a leg up on you in this respect, because my father was born and raised in Kansas. They were a big wheat farming. They planted the wheat in the fall, and then they would put the cattle out on the wheat, or in this case, wheat or barley, because it causes, when the cattle feed on that, it causes the wheat and the barley to stool out. And so this gives you a better harvest. And so what you're really looking at is they raised the barley, and for all practical purpose, barley and wheat. So they had the wave sheaf offering. Now, in the instructions, it's really very clear. It says, what are they supposed to do? They're supposed to take the first bundle of the harvest, right, and cut it. And they're supposed to take that and give it to the priest, right? Now, everyone who has a plot or a piece of land where they're raising this is what they are required to do. Now, it doesn't tell you that they aren't to cut that until the high priest makes a wave sheaf offering. They cut it as soon as the barley is ready to be cut, and they send it off to the high priest. Okay. And so then the instructions, there's only one prohibitive thing that's required in Leviticus, and that is they cannot eat of the product. They can cut it, they can harvest it, they can grind it. In fact, you would have to understand that part of that offering they make is a fine grain, right? There where it's ground. If you look, that's part of the offering. So how did they get the fine grain? Well, because they harvested it and they ground it. The only thing that they can't do is eat it until the wave sheaf offering is made. And so therefore, and this is basically, if you're thinking about this in these terms, you have to think about it in the terms of Christ being the wave sheaf offering. And this is what is pictured by the barley harvest, is the wave sheaf offering. Now, this is, and the reason is because the grain is unaffected by leaven, isn't it? The pure grain is unaffected by leaven. But as soon as you grind it, of course, then it's affected. And this is the understanding, because that offering has to be made in the days of unleavened bread, days that are picturing sinlessness. And so Christ is the one that's being sacrificed at that time. And so this is the picture that we should really have of the barley harvest. This is, at least it's the picture that I get after reading the instructions that are pretty plain in Leviticus 23.
Well, that describes the wave sheaf, or at least that's what you're focused on there. But the days of unleavened bread continued for 7 days. There's another aspect to that we didn't read about is that the beast continues for 3.5 years, roughly. Now, assuming that he ends his tenure at the Day of Trumpets, what's 3.5? What event is 3.5 years before that?
Well,
It could be 3.5 years before
you
that.
see,
It wouldn't be Pentecost.
what you have to understand is the resurrection is on Pentecost. That's
Well,
clear.
Some people will be resurrected on Pentecost. There's
And that's
I think so. Yeah.
that is the first resurrection.
Okay.
That is the first resurrection. How many resurrections do we have? So the first resurrection, that is the first resurrection. And anyone who is resurrected in that, death has no claim on them, period.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, the first resurrection, that phrase is used in Revelation, not used in the Gospels.
Well,
Mhm.
it may not be used in those exact terms, but it's used in picture form. This is basically the implication that you have. All you have to do is think of First Thessalonians, right? And what does Paul say? He says, we. Who is the we? We who are alive. At that time, he was alive, and so he was part of the we. At that point in time, he expected that this resurrection was going to occur, and it was coming immediately. But then after a while, he realized that, wait a minute, we've got this wrong.
Yeah. Well, it deserves more examination. Thank you.
Well, I mean, all you have to do is read and understand. The important understanding here is, and this is something that basically is not understood, and that is, or realized and taught, is the fact that Israel was on both sides of the River Jordan, east and west side.
Mhm.
And as a result, you can see that you can't have a wave sheaf offering if you're using grain that's raised by the pagan people that lived in the area. You can't do that. It has to be raised by Israelites. And so it's clear that Joshua had the wave sheaf offering. It's clear. And so if that's the case, then you have to say, well, where did he get the grain? So there was only one place that he could get the grain. That was from the east side of the Jordan, because when they conquered the land, it was about July. And by the time they got everything settled, you could have a fall planting of the wheat and barley, which is what you would have. It's not planted in the spring. It's planted in the fall. So you can have it's a 5-month harvest for barley. So you figure it out. You can see how it works. The fact is that and if you look at the directions in Leviticus 23, it plainly shows you that obviously you can do everything but do one thing, that's eat it. Because they did grind they had to grind the grain in order to make the grain offering.
Okay, Don, I think we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this.
Pardon.
You have
Okay.
other people who are waiting to make comments, and
All right.
I both sides have got points, and you've clearly stated your position on that. I think we need to move along. Not that I'm agreeing with either side, just we have others waiting.
Sorry.
That's all right. You're very, everyone here is very passionate about their ideas, you know, and their thoughts and their teachings, and that's good to have that zeal. So, Chris?
Hey guys, how's it going? Can you hear me? Oh, he's nodding his head.
Yep.
So yeah, lots to unpack from the previous commenter. But if there's a scripture that says leaven is sin, I would like for you guys to drop it in the chat. Just go ahead and copy and paste that right out of the scriptures and just drop it on over there, because I can't find one. And earlier, Everett said, you know, he made a very good point. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven. The kingdom of heaven is not a kingdom of sin. So leaven can be analogized to being sin, but it's not. That's just an analogy. It doesn't mean, because there's no way that we're going to have an offering of sin. It's just not a thing, right? So, but I had that down in my comments to talk about, because Paul tells us to become a new lump, right? If leaven was a sin, we would never eat it. Like why we don't eat pork and how we don't eat, you know, certain unclean things, right? We can eat leaven 51 weeks out of the year, and we abstain for 1 week. And the reason for that is because Yahweh said to. Yahweh said to get rid of the leaven, so we get rid of the leaven. That's it. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it's analogized to two different things. I also enjoyed the comment that you made, Everett, about how putting on the new man, how long does it take to get dressed? That was a good one, right? That was good. I enjoyed that. And on the topic of you know, while we were yet sinners, that Messiah died for us. That is very, very easy to compare to what happened to the Hebrews at the Exodus, which we're about to commemorate next week, because they were saved. 70 went in, 2 million came out, a mixed multitude of sinners. And they had a problem with that forever. They kept having that problem. And so while we were yet sinners, Yahweh led our adopted parents out of Egypt while they were sinners. While we were yet sinners, Messiah died for us. Messiah died for us when we were lost, before we were born. And that is the message that one of the messages that we should really focus on, because our world is hurting right now and sin is everywhere in abundance, and the people need salvation. They need to understand there's a way out of this mess. They need to understand that this world is not the end of the road, that we are going to go through hard times, through tribulation. But while we were yet sinners, Messiah died for us, and he's coming back for us. And if you want to be a part of that, you could join this mixed multitude by accepting him as the Messiah and being adopted children of Yahweh. Thank you all. Shalom. Have a good Sabbath.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Well said. Bill?
Yeah, Everett, good Sabbath, everybody. Everett, first of all, let me say thank you for bringing forth meat in due season instead of, and hey, anyway, meat in due season. There are things that I agree with Don. I mean, there's so many things that you brought out, Everett, that I'd like to comment on, but the latest thing here with Don, there are things that I agree with Don and the things that I disagree with. But the thing that I agreed with that I had noticed and Don has just expanded on is we have in Leviticus 23, it says, speak unto the children of Israel and saying to them, when you come into the land, which I give you, and you reap the harvest, bring an omer. It really is an omer, a handful of the first fruits of your harvest under the priest. I've seen that for some time. It isn't the priests that go out and cut the very first one, and they have like they do now. They have a certain shaft they've set up and tied up, and they're going to. No, the people had to bring from their harvest, and I too was brought up on a farm. My brothers were actually got into the wheat farming, but not all wheat or barley comes ready for harvest this exactly at the same time. And I've always wondered about the 7 Sabbaths after before Pentecost. But if we read carefully, what Don brought out is additional information. I had seen that Leviticus 23, and he says, "You shall offer that day when you wave the sheaf and he lamb without blemish of the first year, and," verse 13, "the meat offering thereof shall be 2/10 deals of fine flour."
Yeah.
So yeah, what Don has brought out is that the individuals with their farms, they had to take a handful of their first fruits, and it looks like they ground it into flour. And whether they brought a handful just of the grain, probably not. They probably brought this omer.
Did we lose
And
you?
they also then had the flour. What's that?
Oh, you were
Somebody
silent
said-
for a moment. I didn't know if we lost you or not.
Oh, you hear me okay?
Now we do, yes.
Okay, so it's Leviticus 23, and then we know the scriptures 10 through 13, but it's not like the Jews got into of their priests had to go and find a special bunch of barley and then sickle it. It's more like what Don said, as I read it here, and then it looks like, here's the thing that I wonder about, because I know that not everybody's grain comes to harvest exactly at the same time. And I don't know what to think about this, but there's 7 Sabbaths, and it would seem like over that 7 Sabbaths would be when the barley harvest, everybody's individual harvest would finally have been done. And again, I'm just throwing it out there, but thank you for bringing that up, Don. And then where I disagree with Don is, and I have a picture. Even in Joseph's time, they talked about tying up the sheaves. And it says that the Israelites, when they came into the land of Jericho, they ate of the old corn of the land. I think this is my picture, that the Jericho people there, they had harvested their grain, which Israel didn't plant, and they had it tied up in sheaves for drying. So that was the old corn that the Israelites could eat. And then that's what in Judges, is it? And they ate of the old corn of the land and manna. So this has been an enigma in the church for a long time there, but we got a lot of things to think about. But anyway, thank you, Everett, for meat in due season. And there's other things like one other thing I would like to mention: the offspring of the woman. I'm beginning to wonder about the 144,000. Looks more and more like there's going to be the 144,000 resurrected at Pentecost, but the remnant of the woman's seed. What about all the teenagers and the spouses and that have been keeping the Sabbath and holy days, but were never baptized? If they weren't baptized, I don't think they're going to be in that resurrection with 144,000. But it says the remnant of her seed, and there would certainly be a lot of teenagers that maybe all their life had kept the Sabbath and holy days. Wouldn't they be virgins? Anyway, I'm done, but that's just my thoughts I throw out there.
I assume Yeshua has that under control.
Yes. That's why he says, after this, I work and my Father works. They got a lot of work to do.
Crystal's iPad.
Thank you. I was waiting for that. So we've got a couple interesting places to look about this leavening stuff. One's in 1 Corinthians 5. It talks about the old leavening. It says, purge out that old leavening. And then we have Matthew 13:33, some new leavening. And in Matthew, he says, he spoke another parable to them. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast, which women took and hid in 3 measures of meal until all were leavened. So that seems to again put a difference between old leavening and new leavening. And old leavening would be the behavior that's not the mind of Christ. And I put several scriptures in the chat that are itemized about those that you can go back and reference if you want. I listed them out. And we all get caught up in these dogmas and cultisms. Well, the cultisms came from paganism. They didn't come from Judaism. The cultisms were fostered by the Roman Catholic Church, and now we all have our codes and creeds, and we seem to mimic in their behaviors of making our own little dogmas, like it has to be. I'm not saying this is dogma, but pretend that somebody decides that if you don't believe that if the harvests were X, Y, and Z, then you don't have any understanding. Well, that's an external dogma. It's not an internal behavior. And it seems to me that we're not talking about us versus them anymore. We're talking about Christ's mind and our fleshly mind. Our fleshly mind wants to have those dogmas. In Ephesians 4:22-32, it's all about internal and not external. And it's about putting away. Colossians 3:5, verse 5-17, he talks about behaviors. He's not talking about religions. And James 1:13-27, he's talking all about behaviors again. And he's not talking about dogma. But what we were taught by the churches that we've had is that we accept the cog dogma. And then we didn't put away the old man's leavening. We continue to think about hierarchies and fiefdoms and lording over people. And error comes when we focus on external religion and accept bad, wicked behaviors. And that's not the mind of Christ. The mind of Christ is holy and without sin. It is that new leavening. It's unleavened. So that's my point. It's I can focus all day long about all these interesting concepts about harvest here and harvest there and this time of the year and that time of the year, but that doesn't do anything about my behavior. And I think we're called upon at this time of year to focus internally about our behavior and put away the wickedness. Thank you.
Yeah, understanding a lot of what I went through is not nearly as important as how you live your life.
I'm suggesting that a lot of people that don't have any of the understandings that we went through, who live a more godly mind of Christ, are going to be in the first resurrection. And some of the people that have all of the trappings and trimmings of the Torah, or think they do, are going to be outside saying, my lamp is empty. Give me some of your oil. That oil is the mind of Christ. Thank you.
All right, Josh just posted, yeast and leavening are talked about in two ways. That is why the unleavened is part of the Passover, yet the other times we should look at living as positive. Yes, behavior is a focus. Jim?
Good evening, Everett. This was probably aimed more at Chris than at you, but since it looks like he's left, I'd love your comments. He brought up the point about the wave sheep offering and kind of having it be a welcoming. A lot of the evangelicals that I know and that I hang around with see that the Spirit being the entrance into the relationship with God. A lot of the Messianics that we also hang around with see it as their heritage, that they're Israel. And a lot of the BI people see the same thing. I'm a Cherokee, okay? There's no way around that. I'm not BI, I'm not any of that. I believe that I have a relationship with Jesus and with God our Father, Jehovah, because he's called me to it. And I think that sometimes, and I'm not trying to be insulting here, that people take a look and go over the wave sheep offering and how important it is, saying, I welcome everyone in. It doesn't matter what your background is, because they say, I'm Israelite, I'm Jewish, I'm evangelical, I'm whatever. And I was going to bring this up to Chris, but I'm just curious about your take, because I know I'm eternally grateful because I know I'm Cherokee, and the only reason that I have a relationship with Jehovah as my father is because of the sacrifice of Jesus.
Yeah, there's neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female. No. We're all one.
That gets danced over too often, and I think you're 100% right.
Bill?
Yeah, one of my thoughts, I've discussed or considered the leaven hidden in 3 measures of meal. Kingdom of heaven is like leaven hidden in 3 measures of meal. And that's a parable we never really addressed in former association. But more and more, I think what it is, we're baked. The 2 loaves for the Pentecost offering, the 2 wave loaves are baked. We go all the way back to Genesis, and God and my mentor, I'll put it that way, back then said, basically God said to Adam and Eve, go and make your own governments, and I'll come back in 6,000 years and see how it worked out. So man ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And God says, man is become as one of us to know good and evil by the hard way, eating the school of hard knocks, the hard way. So to me, the 2 wave loaves baked with leaven, and the kingdom of heaven is like leaven hidden in 3 measures of meal, which actually, if you look at it, you've got the first people in the first resurrection, which is actually meaning the chief resurrection. And it doesn't mean it has to take all place at one time, right? At the time of the end here, the chief resurrection. Then you have all the character of the people that are born during the millennium, and Satan's not there to really confuse things. And then you have the third massive cooking, baking, which is this second resurrection. The people come up and have, as I understand it, 100 years to learn all the right things and all that. So you've got three different characters. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven hidden in three measures, those three measures of meal. But the leaven part is we all go through learning by eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's why. That's the leaven, and we get baked in it. I'm done.
Igor,
Yeah, Everett, you mentioned that anybody found eating leaven, one of those seven, within that 7 days period would be cut off. If I remember correctly, you mentioned that is somewhat equivalent to death. Can you throw more light on that?
Uh, um, yeah, it's my understanding anyway that when it refers to or uses that expression or similar expression, he should be cut off from his people, that is a euphemism or another way of saying executed. I guess there are a number of places where it is used, and it's a very serious offense. Casting one outside the tribe basically left them helpless if they cast them out, or if they just executed them. I suppose I'd have to go through and refamiliarize myself with all the various uses of that expression. But it was, it was equivalent to, an execution, if not in reality. One other thing I might mention, Tagore, you asked about the number of resurrections before, and I suppose it, bears on the discussion we had earlier on the wave sheaf, but I see two resurrections, I suppose, in unleavened bread. One at the beginning, one at the end. So I guess I'd have to up my number to 4. But like I say, during tabernacles, during the millennium exactly, and after exactly how that's going to work out, I'm not ready to pontificate on. Yeah. So I hope that answered your question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So Ephesians 4 is interesting. So I looked up when you started in this thing, we talk about putting away leaven. So I looked at, where else do I find putting away? Putting away, putting away, putting away. And in Ephesians 4:17 says, I therefore say and testify in the Lord, you should no longer work as Gentiles in the futility of their thoughts, putting away that mind. They are darkened in their understanding, excluding the life of God because their ignorance that is in them because of the hardness of their heart. They've become calloused. In verse 20, but this is not how you learned the Messiah, assuming you've heard about him and were taught because of the truth. And Jesus, you put off, you took away, you took off, you put away, you put out the former way of life, the old self that is corrupt by deceitful desires, with the renewing of the spirit of your minds. And you put on the new self, the one was created in the accordance to the likeness of God in righteousness and purity and truth. And verse 25 again, since you put away lying, speak the truth to each one to his neighbor, because you are members of one another. Put away again, be not angry, and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Do not give the devil an opportunity. The thief must no longer steal. Instead, you must do honest work with your hands so that you have something to share. You put off foul language. No foul language is to come out of your mouth, but only what is good for building up someone else's need, so that it gives grace to those who hear it. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit by which you were sealed for the day of redemption. All put away again, all bitterness, anger, wrath, slander, shouting, it must be removed along with malice. And you must put on and be kind, but compassionate one to another, forgiving just as God has forgiven you. So I saw this in Ephesians 4, this putting off, putting on, putting off, putting on. And it all had to deal with the mind of Christ and the mind, our old mind of the Gentiles, our carnal mind. I'd just like to get your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Well, yeah, and I see the key to that is not trying to build character, as I was taught anyway, but to change your values. That you value your relationship with Yeshua. You ask yourself, why do I do what I do? Am I trying to help somebody else, or am I trying to help myself? Am I trying to protect my own backside? And it shouldn't be a long, drawn out process. It's something that we need to be committed to. If Yeshua is going to be living in us, he shouldn't have to share us with anybody else. There are a couple of scriptures that talk about a double-minded person. Well, what would that be? Somebody who, has one foot walking towards the Creator and another foot going a different direction. That's not a highly regarded position to be in. Yeah, it's got to be a 100% deal. And there again, like Tagore said last time, I think the bar is much higher than what we realized. And he's serious about that. So, yeah, it's not something that should take a long time. In 1 John, it talks about if anyone sins, we have an advocate. Well, we read that like it says when anyone sins, we have an advocate. It should be an unusual occurrence that we succumb. And we need to deny ourselves, follow Christ. He'll take care of us. We need to trust him to do that. Hope that helps.
Jerry?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Everett, and everyone else for the great comments. When I think of, it says that we're supposed to put off the leaven of the old man, the malice and the wickedness. My first thought is nature abhors a vacuum. We're supposed to put out leaven for those 7 days, but we're not supposed to remain unleavened. We're supposed to put on that new man. And what did the Messiah say? He said he was, in John chapter 6, he called himself the living bread. Could the living bread be symbolized by a raised loaf of bread? And should we be, obviously we should be coming like he is, thinking like he is, acting like he does, did and is. Thought of a place where it pretty much sums up our old way of living and the way we should be living now. And it's in Galatians chapter 5, beginning in verse 19. Wait a minute. Let me get there. Bear with me just a minute. Where it says, now now the works of the flesh are manifest. Now these are all works of the old leaven: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, and heresies, envyings, murderers, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of which I tell you before, as I have told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom. But here are the fruits of the Spirit, or the new leaven, that living bread that is the Messiah. The fruits of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And they that are the Messiahs have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts. And if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. So we need to be, in my opinion, we need to be not a vacuum, but putting in that living bread that he talks about in John chapter 6. It says, if we don't eat that bread and drink that blood, we have no life in us. I'm done.
Igor?
Yeah, very good comments. I just want to second what Phil has been saying from the beginning and what Jerry has just said. And of course, Everett is giving us overall picture. Like you can't go in both the directions. You go in the direction of malice and wickedness, or you go in the direction of sincerity and truth, which is unleavened bread. The leaven is malice and wickedness. Malice is kakia, and wickedness is poneria. These two occur at strangest places, strangest listings, like works of flesh and members on earth. And some men do lots of evils. So these appear in the listings. So, and poneria, which is translated wickedness, is one of the defilements that defile you, according to Christ's listing. And anything that is defiled would not enter into kingdom of God. So these are pretty serious sins, and the directions, and as Everett said, you go in this direction of sin, of wickedness and malice, or you go in sincerity and truth. So you can't go both. So that's where we work. Nobody can, I hope, claim that I got rid of all of these lists, all of the things in the list. No, we are work in progress. But on the other hand, we have the direction, good direction of sincerity and truth. That's where we want to go. The word for sincerity is a very fascinating word in Greek. It is helikrinias. Heli is a helios. Helios is sun. And krineia is judgment, to separate, to discern. So you are judging by the light of the sun. It is a pretty interesting metaphoric concept hidden in Heli that is translated in sincerity, but I think it's a poor translation. and truth. He is full of truth, and how his mind and his way represents. That's where we have to eat unleavened bread while getting rid of the malice plus wickedness plus everything else that got associated with these two words. That's my take. Thanks. Sorry, I took a little bit longer.
Crystal's iPad.
Again, in Colossians 3, we have an entire chapter devoted to the same thing, and it's in context. Putting away stuff, killing the old man. It's all in this chapter. And it has nothing to do about religion. It's not about, oh, I got this day better than that day. It says, for you have been raised in the Messiah, seek what is above, where the Messiah is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on what things are above and not on the things of earth. For you have died and your life is hidden with the Messiah in God. When Messiah is your life, is revealed, then you will also be revealed with him in glory. Put off death, which belongs to your worldly nature, which is sexual immorality, lust, evil desires, greed, idolatry. Because of these things, God's wrath comes to disobedience. Once you have walked in these things when you were living in them, but now you have put them away, all the following, which are anger, wrath, malice, slander, filthiness of your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you've put off the old self, which is these practices, and you have put on the new self. You have renewed in knowledge according to the image of your Creator in Christ, and you're neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, for all are one in Christ. He's not talking about religion. He's pretty clear in that last part. He's talking about behavior. He's talking about the mind and the heart of Yeshua himself. It's being the pure giver who gave everything for us. If we could just adopt that pure giving attitude, to parrot again a mentor from our past, there's a way of get, a way of give. If we actually adopt that pure mindset of Yeshua, these other things naturally follow. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question to Everett and rest of the group. Unleavened bread starts with high Sabbath and ends with high Sabbath, while tabernacles starts with high Sabbath, doesn't end with high Sabbath, but the eighth day becomes high Sabbath. Have you done any research on that? Like why, since your title is Last Day of Unleavened Bread, and trying to pull the conversation back to your presentation.
Yeah, I could talk on that a little bit. It's all how you look at it. Tabernacles is 7 days. And God hallowed the seventh day. It's not listed as a Sabbath, but inherently it has a connection with the Sabbath. The Jews called it Hosanna Rabbah, the great salvation. And of course, we think it looks forward to the millennium, which we consider to be a rest, a Sabbath. So it was the climax of the feast for the Jews. Great celebration, according to the Talmud, anyway. They tried really hard to make sure it didn't fall on a weekly Sabbath by freak chance, because they considered it incompatible. But isn't it what we're looking forward to with great anticipation and celebrating as the 7,000th year and the time of his rest. That'll do for now anyway. I hope I made my connection clear enough.
Jim,
Hey, Takor. Yeah, I'm sure you're well aware of Edersheim's, the temple, and other stuff. And I personally have no doubt that the last great day was the 7th day of the Feast of Tabernacles, not the 8th day, not what Worldwide taught, and that it was not a holy day on purpose. And therefore, as Christ said, I have streams of living water. I have work to do. Here's the salvation. And I think that's because the 7th day of Tabernacles was not supposed to be a day of rest, but was supposed to be a day of work. The 7th day of unleavened bread is a day of rest, as we know, not absolute rest, unlike atonement or the Sabbath or other things. But the 7th day of Tabernacles, I think, was supposed to be a major day of work. And that's the reason why you have the 7 days of tabernacle followed by an 8th day, which is a day of rest. And that 7th day is a major day of work. Yeah, that's a personal heresy. I didn't particularly read that out of Edersheim or other people, but they point out really clearly that, that you have the water ceremony and all that, and that the Jews are really clear that this is not a day of rest. And if I accept them with being correct, and I personally do on that, then there's a reason why it's not a day of rest. It's a day of work because the salvation is continuing. And then whatever comes after on the 8th day is different. Okay. Where I think that on the 7th day of unleavened bread, which I only caught a little of Everett's presentation, is a continuation from the 1st to the 7th, where the 8th is somewhat separate in tabernacles. I'd love to hear your comments on that, Everett.
Yeah, I think the reason unleavened bread is 7 days long is because Yah has a 7,000 year plan. It's the same plan as pictured in tabernacles. It's just applying more to those who are sinless specifically.
Bill,
Yeah, Everett, your presentation really stirs up thoughts and brings thoughts to me. I've always wondered about the 7 days of unleavened bread, and right now it just hit me. Paul says, was it in Hebrews? You're not coming to just any old church group. You're coming to the Jerusalem above, and the spirits of just men made perfect.
Right.
So there's 7 days of putting away sin, of growing in favor with God. And then finally, all of us that are going to be in the first resurrection are made perfect. Couldn't that last holy day represent, the church has been made perfect? Just the thought just now occurred to me as we brought that up. The other thing in regards to the Feast of Tabernacles, if any of you would like, I have a paper put together many scriptures. The first day of the feast, there's 13 bullocks. The second day, there's 12 bullocks. Every day, there's always 14 lambs. The bullocks go 13, 12, 11, 7, 9, 8, until it's 7. The 7th day, there's 7 bullocks. that's all symbolic. We know it's all symbolic and it means something. And then the last great day, there's only one bullock. All of that is symbolic. I've got a lot of stuff that puts it together. I've talked to a lot of people about it, and it's awesome when you start seeing all the scriptures fall in. I'm done.
Right, you've mentioned.
I hate to interrupt, but I gotta ask Bill, so for that, do you count the 70 for all 70 nations?
The Jews say that those 70 bullocks are the 70 nations that they are going to rule over with when Messiah comes. No, not quite.
Or maybe
As Paul
but
says,
It's still the forgiveness of sins for all 70 nations, even though they don't know it.
yeah. So, well, yeah, over the period of time. I mean, we know that says if Egypt doesn't come up to keep the feast right away, it's not going to rain in their land, and then they're going to come up to keep the feast. And Egypt is 90% Muslim. They already have some of the, they identify with Abraham. They know pork is unclean. They know Christmas and Easter are pagan. But the 13 bullocks, the 13 tribes, the Jews and the Christians, have a lot. They're firm. They're fertile ground for the Spirit. Let's put it that way.
So, any other comments about the presentation? We're getting off into a discussion here on tabernacles. And I know they do have overlapping importance and meanings, but we're drifting. So, any other questions for Everett about the presentation and the content of his presentation? Bill, as long as it doesn't talk about grace, bullocks, and other things you like to talk about over and over again.
There's 7 churches, and while a lot of people say eras, it says, hear what the Spirit says to the 7 churches, and maybe you have to listen to all 7 for 7 days to get unleavened.
Interesting.
I'm done.
Alan?
Hey, Everett. Yeah, I found that that section you read in the Exodus 15 song that they sang. You made mention of a few verses there, and you called those verses, I think you used the word prophetic. I really like that. The verse I'm really looking at is 17. This is Exodus 15:17. And you will bring them in and plant them. This kind of language is found in other places concerning the return at the end of the age, the return.
Yeah.
And you will plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which you have made for your own dwelling place. The sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord shall reign forever and forever. So just these 2 verses paint a picture of that future, the ultimate future of the land during what I believe to be the millennial period. But you take the next step to the next layer, and then it has to do with his dwelling place, which ultimately is you and I today, where he dwells in his people today. So thank you for bringing that up. You reminded me of something that I haven't looked at in such a long time. I found it very inspiring to be reminded of that. But concerning the coming into the land under Joshua, if you examine the timeline of the book of Numbers, you find that there's about 38 years of Israel's history missing. you see the beginning when they raise up the tabernacle in Numbers chapter 7. And you see their failure to go into the land in Numbers 14. And then the penalty could be 40 years in Numbers 14. But then we jump about 38 years when we get to Balaam and Balak. Balaam and Balak and the bronze serpent incident and the taking of Og and Bashan, king of Moab and king of Bashan. This all took place in like the last year of their wanderings. The only reason I say these things is because someone mentioned that they grew their own barley. They did not grow their own barley. They only came into the land a very short time after Balaam and Balak and the bronze serpent incident and Og and Bashan incidents. So they did not establish farms at that time. They were taking the grain from the land that they conquered east of the Jordan. That's what it was. There was Reuben and Gad and half of Manasseh that stayed over there. They took that land because, you remember why they wanted to stay there? It was premium pasture land for their flocks. It was the land that produced the best grain at that time that they could see because they were still on the east of Jordan. So just a small point. I'm just making a small point about them eating the old grain, as was pointed out by Bill. The old grain in Joshua chapter 5 is the grain that was grown by the previous inhabitants the year before they came in there. But interestingly, there's a 38-year period of Israelite history missing that we don't hear much about. And if you create a timeline in the book of Numbers, you see that is a fact. We only have the record of the first year or so and then the last year or so. So that's all I got to say.
Yeah, thank you.
Jim?
Hey, Alan, why do you think those 38 years are missing?
I would say because it's more of the same. If there was something that was critically important for us to know, it would have been recorded. It's probably more of the same.
Yep.
Same old rebellious attitude, same old opening the ground to swallow people, same old whining and complaining until they had to eat quail until it came out of their nostrils. That's my knee-jerk answer to that.
I don't think it's just knee-jerk. I think the vast majority of scholars agree. You take a look and it's like, why would you have that when there's nothing of interest? We cover the other things that are important. And I'm just going to say, because I know we're coming up to that time frame, it's like Joshua 5. And they take a look and they say, okay, when was, the Passover kill? And just after the end of the 13th into the 14th, or on the afternoon of the 14th, they take a look at Joshua 5 and they go, both sides say, here's all the proof that we have that it was done according to what we say. Joshua 5 doesn't say anything about any of that. And the people who try and read into it ignore the fact that, no, that's not what it's about. And I think those 38 years had nothing of interest that would be there for us. I think sometimes it's as simple as the nose on your face. Those 38 years, nothing really interesting happened. I think you're absolutely right. That's all.
Well, Jim, that's the first time anyone ever said that to me.
What, that I agreed with you? I hope
No, no, that I was right.
I hope that's not right either.
Any other questions for our host, our presenter, is getting me more of a discussion than a Q&A. Alan?
Earlier when you were saying they just didn't get it, Everett, remember you said they didn't get it. Remember that?
Right. Yeah.
One of the things that always jumps out at me is that it wasn't mixed with faith. If we go over and look at the comment that's made in Hebrews, it said not being mixed with faith. Let me see here where that is. I think it's in Hebrews 3 or something. It wasn't about getting it. It was about they didn't have faith. Without faith, it's impossible, of course, to please him. Yeah, right there, Hebrews 4:2. For unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them. But the word preached did not profit them. Why? Not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. So they hardened their hearts because they didn't have faith to listen and to embrace. They didn't have ears to hear the gospel that was preached to them. So when you were saying this phrase, they didn't get it, I guess I kept going back to, yes, because it wasn't mixed with faith, as this verse says. So my question to you and to everyone else that's left here tonight is, faith is a gift. Faith is something that's given to us initially in a small portion, and then we have to grow that. So if it wasn't mixed with faith in them, how could it possibly have been mixed with faith if they weren't given any faith? Because faith is a gift. So why were they penalized for something they could not have possibly done? It's kind of like when you commit a crime and you couldn't possibly have not committed it. You had to do it because you have human nature. You have to commit the crime. And now you have to be punished for something that you had no way of resisting. Am I making the question clear? How could they then be penalized for not having faith when they weren't given the gift of faith? Might be a strange question. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
I think Paul sort of deals with that question. I don't know if I can find it or not, but I think it's like in Romans 2 or so. It talks about a similar thing. All I can say is Yeshua is going to do what's right and what's good, and those folks are going to have a chance to wake up at some point in time and understand. We're all responsible for our conduct. A lot of times we grow up and we don't have the right tools to make the right decisions. And I think that was the case with Israel. I don't think Yeshua is going to terribly punish them if that's the case. And he does indeed plan to resurrect the whole house of Israel and teach them his way more perfectly. So I'll have to defer to him on that matter.
Yeah, we do. We sure do. The other thing I was going to point out is that in spite of the miracles that were mentioned earlier by some, that even in Egypt, the 10 plagues, the opening of the Red Sea, the providing of manna, the pillar of cloud and all the rest, they still hardened their hearts and did not have faith. So there's this idea that if God would just show me a sign, If I could just see him, some people would say, if I could just see him, why doesn't he show himself? And, you know, if he showed himself in a miracle or some sign, it does not produce faith or a positive response, because after seeing all that, they rebelled anyway. They still made a golden calf, and they still did all the other things that brought on calamity. So the idea that if God would just perform a miracle so I could see a miracle, then I would be persuaded. And then I would be his child and he would be my God. That's a fallacy. People think if he'll just show himself, then I will believe. No, you won't. You won't do it.
Yeah, they had plenty of miracles and they just didn't register.
And that's the way we are today as well. These things were written for our admonition, right?
Right.
Thanks, Everett.
Bill?
Yeah, to answer your question, Alan, they should have had faith, because faith is evidence. And faith is taking the evidence that you have. How is it written? Faith is the evidence of things not seen. So God told them he's going to bring them into the land, but he showed them all that evidence. He brought them through the sea. He did all the miracles in Egypt. They had plenty evidence, but they wouldn't use the evidence. That faith is the using of evidence. Faith is evidence of things not seen. So they had lots of evidence, but they wouldn't use it. I think we're all talking about the same thing. But when you come to us, we didn't see people, most of us haven't seen the mighty miracles that they saw. What is the evidence we have? We can read John 3:13, and it says, no man has ascended into heaven. We can see that. Why are all of you Sunday people believing when people die, they go to heaven? We see the evidence. No man has ascended into heaven. John 3:13. David is not ascended into heaven on the day of Pentecost. His grave is right here. We don't have the mighty miracles they have, but we have the scriptures as our evidence. I'm done.
Sorry about that. I was answering someone who, Jim?
Hey, Alan, I guess I have a question for you, because I've heard this before over and over again, and I've looked it up, that faith is the only thing that's is listed as both a gift and a fruit of the Spirit. So you have to have, some kind of interaction between them. How would you explain that? Because for me, it's always been, yes, God has to give faith to start with, but you have to make it grow. And yes, I know that's true of all the fruits, but it seems to me that it's the most important one, and it's the one that God depends upon us to put the most effort into. I'm done, but looking for your input, Alan. Now I'll just say, 1 Corinthians, I think it's 12. Let me look that up. 1 Corinthians 12 listed as one of the gifts, and we all know that it's part of the fruit in Galatians 5.
Yeah. Well, I think it's what you said. We're given us a portion in the beginning, and then we grow it. So yes, it's one of the fruits that become increasingly evident as it grows in you over time. But the initial down payment, like the down payment of receiving the Spirit of God, that little bit of faith is given to you. It isn't like you work it up. You can't create that. You can't, you you can't invent it or cause it to come into being. So it has to be given to you initially.
I agree 100%.
So I forgot what your question was.
Well, you had asked about how that could come about and how we can grow it. And I'm just saying it starts with, it's one of the few things that I see that specifically God implants into us to walk us on the path. And since we're coming up on Passover, it's like the Passover is there to allow us to begin walking with him. And faith is one of those things. And so therefore, the Passover allows us to begin walking with him, but then he teaches us over time. So he gives us faith at the start to begin walking with him. But as he teaches us over time, that faith increases until it becomes the backbone of what we are. I guess that's a bad way of putting it, but it's the way I think about it.
Well, faith is definitely one of the core qualities that we want to cling to, or one of the things that we put up there as among the most important. But you know the verse that says faith, hope, and charity. But the greatest among these is charity. So we can't put it above that, above agape. We have to put it on an equal par with, or as he says in the verse, the greatest among these is charity. Now, how you would want to lay that out, and sort it out, and prioritize it, I guess you could spend some time on that. But yeah, without faith, nothing's going to happen. I mean, without faith, you're dead in the water.
Faith is a whole topic unto itself.
Yeah.
Josh has a question. What makes us different from the lawless Christian?
Well, I would say the lawless Christian.
That was forever.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And I would have to ask, what's a lawless Christian?
Yeah. Well, we're serious. We're examining his word, trying to understand and walk in his way, rather than following traditions. That would be one of the simple ways, I guess, that I tend to approach that matter. Traditional Christians, in many cases, are very sincere and they're doing what they think is right. We're trying to figure out what we think is right, what the reality is. At least I hope that's the case. I think that's the case. I have a friend who specifically says he's not Christian because he doesn't believe the way typical Christians do. And I appreciate that perspective. He asked me once, he said, are you Christian? And I said, well, I'm a follower of Christ. Not knowing his perspective on the matter, I look in his word, try to understand what he's saying as best I can and do it.
Mm-hmm. I think that pretty much sums it up. Jerry, and then we'll get back to Josh.
Yeah, I have a comment about faith if we can still talk about that. If not, I'll just lower my hand. I don't hear any objection, so.
Um, okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Don.
No, I just didn't want it to go off into a discussion on faith. And
Right.
faith is such
right.
a huge topic. It is a massively key part of the whole,
Right.
I'm going to call the experience. And
Right.
without it, we're dead in the water. And it's like we could talk faith all night long. And
I
then
understand.
that's all. I just don't want to get where we're just talking about that. That's all.
Right. I understand. That's
I
why I
didn't
asked
mean
the
to shut
question.
anyone down. It's just that could go on forever.
I
It
understand.
really deserves its own topic.
Like I said, I'll lower my hand.
Sorry about that.
No, no worries.
Okay. Josh, you like to use the term Nazarenes. I have no idea what you're talking about. You use these Hebrew terms and you use terminologies that I know the vow of the Nazarene. I've never taken it. I know we have people from Nazareth. I am not from Nazareth. So you keep coming up with this, you got to be a Nazarene, you got to be a Nazarene, you got to be a Nazarene to this whole thing. And then you wonder why I don't want you to speak, because you keep hammering away on the same thing over and over again. So, yeah, the Torah is important. We got to have a Torah. You got to follow Torah. But there's things in the Torah that apply only to the Levitical priesthood. So, I mean, anyways. Does Revelation say that believers are those who have the Torah and Yeshua? See, that's another thing too, is without Jesus Christ's or Yeshua's sacrifice and without his favor, you are toast. You are no different at all than the person that's outside walking in the ring with their dog right now. There's no difference. It's by his favor that you even know this stuff. It's by his favor that you are given the faith to understand. It all comes down to that. There is no us, there is no them. He has given you the opportunity to be a part of the whole, to support the whole thing. And no, you don't have to be a Nazarene. There is no Jew, there is no Greek. You keep using terminology and then you wonder why we don't want you to speak. I'm done. So anyways, I'm sorry for my tyrant. There is no us and them. It's Tagore.
Yeah, we have put this forum for the people who want to learn, right? Not to cause divisions. That's the policy and that's the spirit we come. We respect one another in spite of our differences. And we try to be matured. Not that we agree with on everything with everybody, but there is a godly way to deal with disagreements. If you are completely out of sync with the beliefs of this room, at some point should look back and think like, is it the room right for me? Maybe there is some other room which is more in sync with your ideas, right? That's my take on that.
Yeah, he's making judgmental statements that only God can make. I think it's fine. I think it's maybe you should look for a different group. We tried the silent thing, and you keep hammering on the same thing. You keep bringing back the same topics over and over again. So maybe it's time to look for a different group. Sorry for the distraction. For those that weren't here, Josh wanted to talk and he kind of was very disruptive, and he apologized for that. And I said, we'll give you one more chance. And if you look at the chat room, you'll see he isn't trying to learn. He has an agenda and we're not going to put up with that here. So I'm sorry. I gave him a chance. He can't say I didn't. Anyhow, back to our discussion. Sorry about that, Everett. I didn't mean to interrupt your time.
That happens now and then. Yeah.
Do we want to go into a chat on faith here, Everett, or seeing that you're 2 hours ahead of us? You got 2 hours more sleep than we do.
Well, yeah, I'm in need of a break here, I think. So
Okay.
maybe I'll just head on out. I actually haven't had dinner yet tonight, so
Oh my.
yeah,
So
have to do that. So I appreciate the opportunity and the discussion, as always. And,
we look forward to your presentation that Norm was so excited about. We do that after the Springoli days.
yeah, I'll plan on that. Yeah. Okay, well, take care. Have a great Sabbath.
Thank you, Everett.
See you again.
Bye, Everett.
Right,
Good,
right.
Everett, and
Take care.
meet in due season. Good, Everett.
Yep.
Good Sabbath.
Okay, now that, let me stop recording. Do we want to talk about faith or something else?